Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the top 10 soundtracks of the 2010s. This list is entirely based upon my own opinion and for games that I have actually played, and there's going to be some unpopular opinions in this video, I know that much, because a lot of people do love the soundtracks for Dark Souls and God of War, but for me, none of those soundtracks really stood out to me. This list includes a diverse range of soundtracks for me, and particularly for composers that show a diverse range from wham bam epic to calm and serenity. But anyway, let's get on with it, starting with number 10. So some of you may be sniggering at this, but LEGO Marvel Superheroes actually had some decent music. At the time it came out in 2013, I knew nothing about Marvel and the Avengers. I mean, I knew the characters obviously, but I thought these soundtracks were actually from a Avengers movie because they are literally that good, dare I use that word. But they are seriously good, and you can actually imagine these being used in an official Marvel movie. Quite possibly one of the scariest games ever made, and most definitely one of the scariest soundtracks of a video game to this day, I think, unless any of you guys can of course refute that statement in the comment section. This soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. It will have you paranoid for days. And then there's the amazing set piece with the fish and the absolutely frantic music that everyone who has played this game will remember. The absolutely frantic moment of being chased by that fish, and then reaching the back room, and the soundtrack completely makes that scene, and it just proves how much a difference a soundtrack makes to a video game. At number 8 we have Borderlands 2 and its DLC. I mean, I don't know what to say about this, it's just a good soundtrack, isn't it? At number 7 we have a soundtrack that I look forward to with eager anticipation with each installment, and this is Rock of Ages 2. Despite not being entirely original, because it is influenced heavily by historical compositions by historical people, it still does have its own unique, wacky take on these compositions, and it's a pretty overall fun soundtrack. The best soundtracks transport you right back to the time that these games came out, and this is exactly what the Bioshock Infinite soundtrack does. A lot of the soundtracks are covers of older music or licensed music, but even the original soundtrack, which is created specifically for Bioshock Infinite, is phenomenal. And a wave of nostalgia hits you, even though it was a mere 6 years ago. It really does hit you with nostalgia, does the soundtrack. Along with the gameplay, of course, and the adventure that you had. Now, Assassin's Creed is synonymous with amazing soundtrack, at least up until about 2015. And I was wondering whether I should include Assassin's Creed 3 or Revelations, but I decided on Revelations because it does have the most epic soundtrack in the series, in my honest opinion. Of course, Assassin's Creed 2 has the most renowned soundtrack, but Revelations does have overall epic to it, especially the soundtrack called Laboured and Lost. But even at the end of the main theme, there's this epic tune, which I am certain it has probably been used in a BBC documentary or something. If it hasn't been used yet in a historical documentary, I would be shocked, really. I mean, just check this out.
For Edward, preserving Protestantism was all that mattered, but the English decided differently. They wanted a real Tudor as the next monarch, and for that they were prepared for anything, even for Edward's worst nightmare, a return to Catholic England.
Quite possibly one of the most depressing soundtracks I've ever heard in my life is Heavy Rain, and this came out, well, at the beginning of the decade, so the music was most likely created in 2009 or something, but due to technicalities, this game is part of this list. But yeah, this game, if you played this game and you didn't get PTSD, then you have a seriously strong mind, because this game is just gut-wrenching, really. Particularly if you get the really bad ending. But yeah, the soundtrack is really somber and just heartbreaking, in a good way, kind of. I think by now everyone will have instantly recognised this tune and the game it comes from, which is The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, or just Skyrim. If you haven't played this game yet, then you can't really call yourself a gamer, can you? But yeah, I'm pretty sure this game is in everybody's top lists, if not, you know, number 1 or number 2. But for me, it is at number 3, because there are obviously 2 better games. At the time, it probably was like number 1, most definitely, I would say. And it's just such a nostalgic soundtrack. Again, it just reminds you of going on these adventures across the vast landscapes, and I'm pretty sure everyone will have a unique memory, like exploring a cave, or for example, being in the Reach, or the Rift I think it was, where all the leaves are autumn, and this tune comes on. It really is such a beautiful soundtrack, and it's just beautiful. And you know, I don't really need to explain your own nostalgic memories. I'm sure that you hold for this game and the soundtrack in particular. Yep, you guessed it, at number 2 is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. What a fantastic soundtrack this had in way back in 2015, but its DLC also had fantastic soundtracks, particularly in Blood and Wine, which came out in 2016, did it? Or was it 2017? I get mixed up between the two. But even if we discount the DLC, the main game had a fantastic library of soundtrack that really did capture the environment that you were in, and it really did immerse you in the world. Like in Valen, the really downtrodden poor area, muddy, murky, swampy, the soundtrack really did encompass that feeling of desperation, of depression, and general downtroddenness. Whereas if you move to, say, Toussaint, which was in the DLC, the vibrancy of the world is also displayed in the soundtrack, with influences from France, Italy, and Spain, I believe it is. It's just an amazing game and an amazing soundtrack. At number 1 we have a phenomenal and well-deserved soundtrack from Battlefield 1. And this for me is the biggest surprise of the decade. I mean, who would think that Battlefield would have such a remarkable soundtrack? There has to be, including the DLC, there is about at least 100 plus soundtracks, including the numerous sound files that are only about 15 to 1 minute seconds? From 15 seconds to about 1 minute long. It's just a phenomenal soundtrack, and each of them are different. There are a few themes that you do recognise within a few of the soundtracks, but overall there is such diversity of the soundtrack. It is, no words can describe it, it's amazing, and if you've never played this game, I wholeheartedly recommend you just at least check out the soundtrack. The links will be in the description for all the games actually, where you can listen to the soundtracks. It's just incredible, and no words can describe it. Especially during the gameplay, the new game mode that Battlefield 1 introduced called Operations. With this phenomenal soundtrack, it created an experience which is now actually a huge fan favourite, which is kind of being destroyed in Battlefield 5 to everyone's annoyance. But in Battlefield 1, the music and the soundtrack creates such an experience of panic, and you have to play it to experience it yourself, because when there's like, let's say 10 lives left for the whole team and we still haven't captured the objective, and this frantic music plays, suddenly everyone is chasing the objective, and it's such an adrenaline fueled experience. I cannot recommend it enough.